Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm going to be looking at the first half of April with a focus on the full moon in Libra, and then I'm going to be taking you through the astrology sign by sign. So it's one of my longer videos, giving you a lot of time to really figure out personal things as opposed to what's going on in the world. Now, before I get stuck into this full moon, and it's a meaty full moon, I want to remind those of you who knew but haven't done anything about it, and those of you who don't know about it at all, that I'm starting my advanced course on April the 17th, April the 18th. It's a Saturday. And if you are interested in joining, please let me know. You can go to my website, Astrology, go to the courses tab, have a look at what's going on and click on the tab and get some more information and join if you so wish. In this final three-part, I've done 3 modules. This is the third. We're going to be focusing quite heavily on synastry, which is the astrology of relationships. And I'm also going to be looking at midpoints more closely and harmonics. Now, a lot of you probably haven't heard of harmonics before, but it is about folding the chart into a kind of, well, if you know about number 4, fourthness, number 8, eighthness. So you're getting a kind of resonance by folding up the chart in this way, and it can be incredibly revealing depending on what you're using a harmonic chart for. So we're going to be looking at that, looking a little bit more at what I do, political astrology, and just generally taking all the kind of stable work, the kind of initial studies that, well, certainly my course has taken you through, but those of you who feel you're pretty accomplished at astrology, but actually you would like a little bit more insight into these other things that I've just mentioned. So I would love to see you all, along with those who are already joining me. And I think that's all the news. And I might as well just get on with the full moon in Libra and this all-important first half of April. Although I have to say, the first half and the second half are packed with promise. Let's just use that phrase because it allows us to think of things that we are looking forward to, because of course Easter comes around the time of the full moon and lots of us decide to get together with family and friends, or we do special things. There are lots of weddings and christenings and things like that that happen at Easter, and of course the Easter celebration itself, which is to do very much with the Christian calendar. So that comes in the middle of all this, or middle of the first half of the month. And so there is that aspect of joy and raising one's spiritual kind of consciousness, let's put it that way, looking into all things spiritual, an elevated period of time. But there is no getting away from it. I am recording this video on Tuesday, the 24th of, I'm just going to check that this is 24th, yes it is, the 24th of March. And that gives you some perspective, because at the moment, things that are happening in the Middle East, in Iran, are changing almost by the hour. We've gone not by the week or even not by the day anymore, but it's by the hour. So I want you to know where I am in terms of what's going on, because clearly these very powerful influences are having a very key and important effect on what's going on in the Middle East. Now, just to sort of put things astrologically into place, the signature on the war in Iran really was that solar eclipse at 28 degrees of Aquarius, which happened back on the 17th of February. But in fact, the war started when Mars reached that same degree of 28 of Aquarius, squaring Uranus at 28 of Taurus, well, 27, 28, and really reflecting the astrology. And what has been so fascinating this year from a kind of technical viewpoint is just how spot on the astrology has been in terms of the extreme turbulence that we've experienced, the conflicts, the rises and the falls, and a lot of the things that we've been witnessing having a relevance to that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And I think we've seen it so much in evidence that we are trying to find where truth lies in a sea of lies, if you like. And, we are being presented with one story one day, another story another day, facts being countered by somebody else or some other organization. And so life is full of things that we can't trust anymore. We can barely trust what we see. And into the middle of all this is artificial intelligence, which is now so difficult to see the difference between someone who's real and someone who has been artificially put together, that it is really difficult to separate truth from fiction. And the Saturn-Neptune conjunction has definitely played a part in that. But I think more significantly, that Saturn-Neptune conjunction is hovering over the base of the United States chart. So that's the chart, the Sibley chart that we use, 7076, 5:10 in the afternoon, Washington, D.C. And when you put Saturn and Neptune together, and I just talked about this, shattered illusions, instability, confusion, you can see that this is happening both in the sense of the homeland, which is where the IC represents the home, the base, because people are confused and they are, there is a great sense of unrest. And the Saturn part of that dynamic is busy trying to control things and putting things in place that keeps everybody in control, while the Neptunian part of it is trying to dissolve former kind of structures. So nobody's feeling very safe, nobody's feeling very sure. But of course, that IC point is opposition the midheaven, which is where we find the leadership and the government of a country. And what we've certainly seen here is a lot of dissent and confusion and direction that has happened within the government. And we have seen a few heads fall, as we would expect. Kristi Noem, for instance, is one. But I think this whole period of time puts Donald Trump into a very, very precarious position. Regardless of how tough he appears and how confident he appears about what's going on, I think the truth is that he is in a very, very difficult position. I think that the structure of the government is far from as strong as it seems. You've got a faction who are very good at speaking out and making it seem as though they know what they're doing. But within it are great fears of whether they'll still be in power. Well, they will still be in power by the time we get to the midterms, but just how much that power is diluted by those midterm elections that are hovering over certainly the Republican Party, so that you've got a lot of fear and a lot of instability. And I'm not going to, talk very much about the president of America at this particular point in time, except to say, of course, that solar eclipse was on his ascendant and on his Mars. And so we just know when you've got an eclipse playing into the situation that some very fateful events are about to unfold. And we know what they were. The war in Iran was that fateful event. What will ensue from that in terms of the president's leadership, and whether he stays or whether he goes, whether he personally is affected in some way, or whether there is something else that's much bigger than that that sort of changes his position. I think April is going to be crucial for all of that. We're going to see a lot of, I think, restructuring in the government. I think we'll see more heads falling in the American government, the administration. And we'll have to wait and see how things unfold in the next few days and weeks to see what kind of position the president will be in. But I would say, from a professional point of view, it's not looking good. And if, I'm at the moment working on a talk that I'm going to give at Amadam, which is about electional charts. It's about setting a moment for things which are most favorable to whatever it is you're wanting to have a most favorable set of influences. And I went back to look at Joan Quigley, who advised Nancy Reagan. Maybe Ronald Reagan didn't think much of astrology, but Nancy certainly did. And he certainly listened to Nancy. And it was so interesting to see how her timings and the explanations for her timings about crucial meetings and television discussions, those kind of things, really, they're fascinating to see. So I'm sorry, I'm digressing there, I'm going slightly off-piste. But coming back to the current president of the United States, if I were to be advising him, well, for a start, I wouldn't have advised him to go bombing into Iran at this point in time. But it is what it is. That's what's happened. And now we have to see what is going to unfold from that. Now, yes, bringing us up to date in that situation, what we know today, that the threats that the president laid out on his Truth Social on the Saturday, Sunday, which were about, giving Iran 48 hours to come to the table, to free up the Hormuz Straits. That changed by the Monday. We were already now hearing that the talks are going on, that Iran is definitely coming to the table. All is going to be well. But you look at, what I'm going to take you through in a minute, and you'll see that no, all is not well. And we've also got to remember that there are thousands upon thousands of troops already on their way to the Gulf, and they're not being sent for no reason. So I think we're probably going to see some really difficult things in this first half of April and also in the second half. Now, on my Friday bite, I did say something about May the 1st, and there's, I think around there's a full moon, and I felt that gave the strongest indication of some kind of ending of this war. So we'll have to wait and see. But April clearly is where everything is going to be decided. And yes, I'm going to take you through some of the more important things as we look at the charts. Now, the other thing to mention about this full moon, it's a full moon in Libra, takes place on the 2nd of April. It's about 3-something in the morning in the UK, which means it's on the 1st of April in America. And, well, yes, the 2nd of April everywhere east of Greenwich for the rest of the world. And this full moon is the twin, or the other part, the bookend, if you like, to the new moon in Libra, which took place on the 21st of October 2025. So there's a 6-month span here, just a little bit short of 6 months. And there's always events that are connected. If you began something at that particular point, then you've arrived at a point where you're looking at how successful things have been. Is it still a goer? Are you still going to continue with it, or has it reached the end of its shelf life? And a lot of things always come to a head on a full moon. They always do. We've got simmering situations coming to the bubble. But we also have the prospect of unity. Always in a full moon is unity. And when you think about Easter, and I was mentioning weddings, a lot of people are going to get married on and around this full moon. And the idea of a union, male and female, but let's get too much into the gender issues here. But yin and yang, let's talk about that. There is a kind of sense of union coming from that. And it's a good thing to play around with. If you know you've got something around 13 degrees of Aries or Libra or Cancer or Capricorn, then this full moon is going to be full of meaning for you. And the idea of union and separation, of curtains coming down on things, of endings, happy endings, and also the idea of separations and the end of the story for things. You'll be playing around with those themes and seeing how apt that is for you. But I think also when we follow the rhythm of the new and full moon cycle, we get into the habit of thinking of every new moon is an opportunity to start something new. So we put our energies in a new direction and we stop doing other things that may have been part of our existence for a while. And with a full moon, we close things down. We say, that's it, we're done with that. Spring is here or autumn is here. I don't do that anymore. It's not the season for doing that. And if we keep to that rhythm, it is a nice rhythm of life linked to the lunar cycle. And of course, the moon is our nearest celestial body. It's our satellite. It's not a planet. But either way, the whole pull of the tides, the pull on our emotional tides is always very strong. And in the sign of Libra, I think Libra, the sign of balance. And when you think of this opposition, Sun in Aries, Aries is ruled by Mars, Venus rules Libra. So we've got opposites here, male, female, yin, yang, war, peace. We're playing with quite an interesting dynamic. Now, I'm going to get into looking at the days surrounding this full moon and tell you a little bit more about the full moon, because I do think it's a game changer. And for that reason, I'll just take you to the chart. And there we are. We have this on the screen. Now, look, that is quite a dramatic picture, isn't it? And I've taken this from the perspective of London for a change, for two reasons, because I do look a lot at America and Washington. And, the United Kingdom has really found itself in a very, very difficult position, both in connection with this war in Iran, but according to Russia, I mean, England, the United Kingdom, is now the great Satan, so to speak. We've replaced America, and now we're really in the sights of Russia. We are the bogey. And of course, we have seen quite a lot of, certainly cyber attacks and assassination attempts on our soil. And we certainly see Russian or know of Russian submarines in our waters. So we are constantly being monitored. And a lot of the seabed infrastructure, which has been targeted, is probably, certainly by Russia. So we're in quite a tricky position here in the United Kingdom. And of course, on top of that, we've got certainly some issues with the President of America, who sees us as rather a namby-pamby government, which seems a bit antithetical to the British nature. But anyway, we've got our Prime Minister in quite a sticky spot here. And I thought this chart really presented that to us quite well. This full moon, 12 Aries, 12 Libra, is close to the MCIC axis. And whenever any planetary event or planet per se is on an angle, it does assume much more power. So this full moon is a powerful full moon for Britain. And this is also emphasized by the fact that the ascendant at 9 degrees of Capricorn is very, very close to the Great Britain sun. And that is the 1066 chart. And of course, we can see my square drawn out here. The full moon itself, sun opposition moon, is squaring Jupiter here and opposing the ascendant here. So all these are angular positions here, making this a very, very powerful full moon. So for us, we also are facing some changes in our leadership. I'm not saying that Sakir himself looks as though he's going to have to fall on his sword, but I do think there are going to be some departures, again, whether they leave to join the Reform Party or whether their position becomes untenable as a minister. They have to resign. And I certainly think Sir Keir is but far from safe. But as this war progresses, I don't think the country is in the mood for any kind of national hiatus. We want everything focused on our position, us not being vulnerable to the aftershocks of the war. I think what's interesting here too, if we look at this full moon, 12 degrees of Aries, Libra, that is very, very near King Charles's midheaven and his Neptune. And although we don't hear a lot about it, the Andrew situation has been a major crisis for the monarchy. And there is clearly some division in the sense of who feels that a new guard would be preferable and would help the monarchy to stabilize, and those who feel the absolute opposite, that things should stay the same because that's going to keep stability and ensure the stability and security of the monarchy. So there's a division going on there. But I think with this full moon flanking King Charles' MCIC axis, as it is indeed here, the other way around, I have to say. So Aries is on his midheaven, Libra is on his IC, Leo rises, and incidentally, Pluto is on his descendant at the moment. I think we can expect, I'm expecting it this year, not necessarily this month, but I think we get a little bit nearer that point this month with the idea there does have to be a change of guard here, not only for the stability of the monarchy going forward with a younger, more dynamic, more determined to change things king, but also I think Charles has a terminal illness and he will get weaker, not stronger as time goes by. And I think every time there's a full moon or there's something going on in his chart, we get a little bit nearer that time that there will have to be some kind of announcement. And, well, we'll keep tabs on that a little bit. But there are other things, I think, that are interesting. I looked at the idea of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which we can see here. I've talked about that in relation to America's chart. But guess what? This full moon in Libra is also on Vladimir Putin's sun. So he's got some very stressful, he's got some bubbling issues coming to the surface. And at the moment, there is some talk of big kind of developments in Russia. Their mobile internet is not really available. So life is difficult in Moscow. And often if internet gets shut down, it's for some kind of reason, a political reason. And the rumor mill is alive and well with the fact that Putin is very much fearful of an uprising or a coup, one or the other. And I certainly think this full moon is going to fan his fears. And of course, we're not hearing so much about Russia and Ukraine because of the situation in the Middle East. But I thought that I should mention those things as we go along. So the full moon itself is occurring on the 2nd of April. And before that time, and probably as this video goes up, we have the Saturn-Pluto sextile. Now, this is not necessarily an aspect of great import, but anytime you get two big planetary, they're the big guns here, it takes you back to their whole cycle, which began in 2020. And I did mention this in my last video, and sort of calmed everyone's fears and saying, oh, I'm not saying that, we'll have a recurrence of the pandemic. But what was quite interesting and is interesting is that there was an outbreak of meningitis in a part of Britain that sent great fears out that maybe this was the beginnings of something that was much larger. As it was quite extensive, and there were deaths and also panic. Well, not panic, but everybody was very concerned and had a massive vaccine program wheeled out to university students and school-age children. So we saw a nod to that at that point. But then again, still, there are references to how the government acted. So there are inquiries going still about that 2020 period. And of course, we have a lot of information and things going on in the lives of Harry and Meghan, who, of course, left Britain on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020, and now, 6 years later, are really looking at how successful that move was. And that's what happens when you get two planets that are in a cycle. When they reach important stations, usually the squares and the oppositions are what I take note of. But even in the lesser important aspects, sextiles and trines, there is often a nod to the original events around the time. So that's an interesting one. If we move to the 30th, which is the Monday of the week, Venus heads into Taurus. Venus is strong in her own sign. And I suppose you could say this being a sign that doesn't want hassle, that wants things to be stable, that wants peace, that wants things to grow, that is interested in stability, security, that kind of thing. Maybe Venus's arrival in her own rule sign is going to be something else that helps stabilize our very unstable world at the moment. But of course, she's got a long way to go. She has a month's cycle. And so, again, that brings us to the beginning of May, which I think is perhaps our first chance of seeing some proper ending to the hostilities. I hope it's before, but right now it's looking like early May. And that may not even be a complete end, even when we get there. And so here we come to the full moon, which we can see here. And the full moon is squaring Jupiter. Remember, we've got it in a big grand cross here. And Jupiter is the planet of growth, the planet of prosperity, the planet of all good things. But the only trouble is that its principle of growth doesn't necessarily tell us whether it's good growth or, the escalation of something. So we simply have to look at escalation here, as opposed to the ending of things in and on and around the full moon. We're going to see an escalation of things. And I've already talked about what are all these American troops, Marines, doing on their way to the Gulf. If not, they're not going there for a holiday. So the chances of some kind of boots on the ground situation probably hovers around this full moon squaring Jupiter, which is giving us escalation. And I think, coming back to the idea, this is GB's sun here on the ascendant, and this is set for London, that I think that it's going to be difficult for Great Britain one way or another. Either if we refuse our help, then that severs the relationship really with America. And if we go ahead with some kind of support, that puts us, right in the sights of Iran as, well, we probably already are, in fact. So, but it's not good. Britain is between a rock and a hard place here. We can see this in this full moon chart. And I'm now just pointing to what's going on with this Jupiter intersecting it. Now, the day after the full moon, which means that this Venus-Pluto square is applying as the full moon builds. So here we have Venus, and here we have Pluto here at 6 degrees of Aquarius. So this is a very passionate coupling. And if we just use that word passion, we think of it in the sense of love and romance. I mean, how beautiful is a Venus-Pluto angle when you're truly, madly, deeply in love? That's great. But if things are going pear-shaped, then they will really go pear-shaped on a Venus-Pluto square. And I certainly think this points to some crisis about the oil. Now, we've seen oil prices really soar since this war began, because of fears that we're running out of oil and not being able to get oil, which we all need. It's gone up and down according to the way things appear to be. But I think there's a very good chance around this full moon, especially if this ties in with some kind of ground maneuver. I think it's fair to say that we can see the oil price rocketing, and rather a lot of other things, jitters everywhere through the markets at this particular time. Mercury is trine Jupiter. Again, it's a nice little aspect. Mercury in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer. And you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of, in the midst of fire and fury, there are some angelic voices to be heard saying, please, please, please don't do this. Think of humanity. So there's quite a strong sound being emitted by this Mercury Jupiter trine, which says, let's at least talk about justice and peace. Even if we can't get it right now, we should still keep things on the table. I think these two things going together are really very apt. Sun square Jupiter on the 5th here. Well, I don't want to repeat myself, but if things are good, they're going to be fabulous. If things are bad, they're going to be off the charts bad. Jupiter expands whatever it is focused upon. So whether we're talking about our personal lives, what's going on there, are we over the moon happy because everything's going well, things are blissful for us, or are we thoroughly miserable because everything is turning pear-shaped? So Jupiter will expand that. Now, this is very interesting. On the 9th, Mars moves into Aries. Here in our chart, we can see it in Pisces. But by the time we get to the 9th, then Mars will be in Aries. And by the time it gets into Aries, it's going to first of all meet with Neptune, and then it's going to meet with Saturn. Now, we can see that it's going to meet with Neptune on the 13th, because that's in our little half part of April here. But then Mars will conjoin with Saturn a few days after the 15th. So, intents and purposes, we see Neptune and Saturn as a couple, as the things that are united. And I've spent a little time earlier in this video talking about that. Mars, of course, is strong in its own sign of Aries. So Mars works well in Aries. So here we are looking at a time of war and assuming that this is going to beef things up. But it's for all of us, that Mars in Aries. So we could also say this is a time for all of us to have courage. This is a time for all of us to take action on things. This is the time for all of us to embrace our Aries energy. Remember, we've got Aries somewhere in the chart. We've got Mars somewhere in our charts. We need to embrace that spirit of that planet and find our courage and our desire to manifest things in life. And what we want to not allow to happen is aggravation, which Mars is very good at, and conflict and confrontation. We want to soft pedal those things. The only things we want to confront are things we need to do something about. We don't need a confrontation. We need to soft pedal all of that. But by the time Mars gets to Neptune, and even during this period, even if we look as far as the full moon here, Mars is very close to Neptune. It's creeping up on Neptune. And that creates confusion. And it's more of the same stuff. Lies, lies, and damn lies. I mean, we're seeing everything through the prism of a very distorted lens. And it's very difficult to see where truth lies. And there'll be nothing like that kind of effect when we get Mars moving over this Mars-Saturn conjunction. Mars moving to Neptune and then to Saturn. So Mars on this Neptune-Saturn conjunction. This is going to be a very, very dark period, I think, certainly for conflicts generally. But of course, we can go to the opposite point and get extreme kind of, what's the opposite of war, really? It's love. So the potential for love, to conquer all is also within this configuration of Mars to Neptune and Saturn. what this has also brought me to is this idea of these planets. We've been looking at this ever since January. We've been looking at this group of planets moving forward through the signs. We've had it through Aquarius, we've had it through Pisces, and now we're having it in Aries. And, by the time we get a little bit further into Aries, well, of course, Mercury will be in Aries at some point, Mars will be in Aries, the Sun, Venus, and we've got and of course, Saturn and Neptune. So we've got this cluster in Aries. Now, I know a lot of people are really taken up by this and taken up by the idea, well, this has never happened in Aries before. But from my opinion here, the important thing always with astrology are the planets. The planets tell the story of everything. Their alignments with other planets, their configurations that they present us. And remember, as we go round the sun, Earth is moving round the sun along with all our planetary partners, and there are resonances between us all. And that's really, really important. And we're moving against the background of the zodiac. And that's the thing to remember. We're moving against the background of the zodiac. The zodiac is like our stage set. It's like our costumes. So Mars is always Mars, Neptune is always Neptune, Venus is always Venus, and it takes on the costume of the sign that it's moving through. So in and of itself, I don't necessarily think the fact that everything is happening in Aries is a sort of thing to get all hyped up about. I think it's an extension, really, of what we've been living through, really, since the second part of January, as we've seen this group of planets moving over Pluto, squaring, conjoining the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, squaring Uranus. So it's like an ongoing train moving along the tracks, and the scenery around it, which is the zodiac circle and the sign of Aries in this case, is what we're seeing reflected through the windows. But in terms of effects, I think, it's more of the same with a different background. Let me try to put it that way. So I just wanted to explain that a little, because I think it's a bit of a misconception to think that all of it happening in Aries is significant, as opposed to all these planets moving around in lockstep through the zodiac as a team, with the background changing. That's really what we need to be looking at. Oh, yes, I know what I wanted to do while I was here. Having, gone through that chart in terms of, from the London perspective and also from the general perspective of it all, I thought it was quite interesting to see the full moon chart in terms of Iran, because I think it is important in the Iran situation. And I'm just going to quickly flash this up for you so that you can see it. I'm not going to spend a long time on it, but so as you can see from this chart, the full moon is cutting across the ascendant-descendant axis at the time. So it's on an angle, this full moon. It's doubling its power. And the same really with Jupiter on an angle. But, Iran's sun is 11 degrees of Aries. And the sun is right on Iran's sun, opposing the moon. So this is going to be really, really important. And again, it makes me think about this ground operation being likely, in and around this time, because of the response. Remember, the full moon is a fleeting thing, really. It isn't something that's, going to take a week or so to come about and end. I mean, yes, we've got a 2-week cycle from full moon to new moon to consider. But I think in terms of the full moon happening, we've got immediate events. So something immediate is happening here to Iran, symbolized by the full moon, which is on their moon. So we're certainly looking at, I think, again, the regime. What do we have going on with the regime here? And also their partners, Iran's partners. Remember, the seventh house is partnerships. So who are Iran's partners? Well, they're the partners, if you like, in the Middle Eastern regions, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, all of them. There's also Russia, who's been feeding Iran intelligence, and there's also North Korea, China, India, maybe not so much India, but we've got these big guns that are also big powerhouses. And so this looks very interesting in terms of Iran, just how much help they're getting from their partners, or just how much opposition and separation they're getting from them, is a very big theme around this time. So I don't want to spend a big long time on that, because I think we've done quite a lot of the astrology. And I suppose what I need to get on with really is, everything sign by sign. And, I do this on the full moon because I don't know, I can't do it every time. I can, at the moment, manage about 2 videos a month with my schedule. And so one of them I like to be for everybody, so that we could see, see something from a personal perspective, as well as dealing with what I'm also passionate about, which is what's going on in the world. So those of you who are used to me will know that each of these signs, I use them for your sun sign. If your sun sign is Aries, then and that's all then you can look at the Aries interpretation. If you've got Gemini rising, you can look at the Gemini interpretations as well as the sun sign. I think the sun sign is quite an important perspective to look at events from and alignments from. Okay, so let's begin. And of course, we're going to begin with Libra. So Libra, this full moon in your own sign, is a sign of empowerment. When you get a full moon in your sign, you are empowered. And I think it's really, really important to remember this, because you give away, well, I would say you give away your power. It's just that you are such a considerate person. You like to please people. You like to be sure other people are happy. Other people approve of you. And if there's approval and agreement, then you're a happy bunny. But sometimes that means that you're not getting what you need. And this full moon is about that. It's about recognizing what you need and what you need to ask for, or what you need to make obvious that are in your needs and interests. We look at the sun moving through the 7th house. So we're in the area of partnerships, and this could be a very important period for your love life, or it could be just an important period for relationships generally, whether you're talking to people professionally, so you're thinking of either making a professional move, or you're aware that you need to change your job, or there are things to do with your job situation. Talking to people about it is the way forward. And perhaps looking at those people who've always backed you before and who sympathize and like you is a good way forward. And in fact, I think there could be some very good results for those of you who are job hunting or seeking some kind of major career step. When you look at this picture here, with the moon in your sign, the sun in your opposite sign, everything to do with relationships. And there we have Jupiter on high in the 10th house of career and life direction. I think not necessarily on the full moon itself, or that's possible, but during the course of this full moon cycle, which is the waning cycle back to new moon, there could be some very, very positive developments in career. And there's also this other side of Jupiter, I think, which is about performance. And so some of you have got some important events. They can be personal events. Then this full moon squaring Jupiter sort of gives you the sense that you'll be taking the spotlight. And I really like that. There's lots of good things issuing from that. However, we can't forget that if you looked at the first part of this video, you'll know that Mars is going to move over Neptune and Saturn during the course of April. And that can be a problem for a relationship. You're going to start to see the negatives, or things can turn pear-shaped, whether it's a working relationship or it's a romantic relationship. And that full moon playing into things can mean, depending on the extent of the difficulties or the extent of what's happened, that really this marks the end of a relationship. But as I was talking about earlier, this idea of Easter and weddings and union, both these things are represented by this full moon. And you can also see I've done this other little triangle, and that's the triad of planets, Pluto, Neptune, still Saturn, and Uranus, which have been in sync, really, for the past year. And they're going to be in the same kind of relationship with each other through until the early September, or maybe a little bit longer. I'm just going from memory here. But every time you get a planet moving over any of these points, a lot of the meaning of the things that are happening in your life in terms of what you might call as fate steps in. Those are the events that are going to be triggered. And I think particularly as we get through this early April period, maybe obviously March is behind us now, but you could be looking in retrospect and saying, yeah, well, this already happened. And yes, and there's the reason why. But for some Arians, this is all still to come. So feel empowered. This is not the time to shrink from the limelight. This is not the time to fail to step up. This is your time, Libra, as pointed by this powerful configuration for you to stand up, for you to shine. I'm going to end on that. Scorpio. This full moon cuts across the 6th, 12th axis. So if you were coming to Amadown to hear me talk, you would go away with a lot of information about what all of this means. As it is, I'm going to have to give you a whistle-stop tour through it just for this period of time. But the 6th, 12th axis is important in spiritual terms. When we think about our life purpose, we do the work of spirit in the 6th house. The 12th house is our release, is our escape, is where we go beyond into the spiritual realms, if you like. So it's a strong spiritual full moon for you. But we come down to this tier of meanings with the 6th and 12th houses. We're looking at health and we're looking at work. So a full moon brings things to a head. So there could be a work situation that now comes to a head. And, you know, I talked long and loud about this really since the start of the year when I was looking at the year ahead and saying that 2026 was a year of crisis and opportunity. And this is exactly what this full moon is all about. And maybe things come to a head. There's a bit of a crisis, whether it's a health crisis, whether it's a work crisis, whether it's a crisis in and around your life generally that upsets the natural run of things in your life, then it's an opportunity because, you know, what's going to come out of it is going to be what should come out of it, and you'll be on to some kind of new trajectory. If we look at the Jupiter connection, that full moon squaring Jupiter, which of course I talked about in the first part, it has the capacity to make things bigger. And let's hope that what it makes bigger are the good things and not the things that you don't like so much. But Jupiter is currently lodged in the 9th house for you. So that's an area of long distance. It's an area of far horizons. So we get literal far horizons, people and places far away, but we also get the idea of targets far away in the sense of where do I want to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And with Jupiter here, it's encouraging you to really think big about your future and to bring the future really into the present so that you're doing something about it, not just talking about it. You're actually going to lay some foundation stones, do some actions to support where you want to be a bit further down the line. It could also say there's a bit of a crisis in a foreign country. or a bit of a crisis linked to travel, or even to do with if you're on a study course or you're taking exams or things like that, then you have to be careful not to be overwhelmed with what lies in front of you. You've got to keep stepping back so as not to lose your focus and get things into proportion. And that's something to remind yourself about on the full moon, on and around the full moon. Don't get things out of proportion. That's really, really important. But otherwise, I think, again, I like this because I assume that everybody who loves astrology has some kind of spiritual philosophy. And this is a spiritual full moon. And it is both a time when you might be feeding your spirit, but also a time when questions to do with your spiritual path are raised with a view to really understanding, or if necessary, to change something in some way. And also, of course, we've got that Saturn-Neptune conjunction in there, and that nice little triangle with Pluto, Neptune, Uranus. And I think this is also kind of pinpointing the idea that, and it may take us some while to come about, but it's, full moon will bring it to a head and then it'll pass again and move on. This idea of what is your purpose in life, and maybe a lot of the things that are going on at the moment are leading you to understand that. Sagittarius. This full moon, well, we've got the sun in Aries at the moment, your fellow fire sign, and we've got the moon in Libra, which is it's in harmony with you. So technically speaking, this is a rather nice full moon for you. It falls on the axis of creativity and collaboration. And again, thinking about the time this full moon is taking place, which is Easter, the idea that you could be collaborating, or you could be doing things of a very creative, fun, and pleasurable nature. And with Jupiter in the mix, if things are going to be celebratory, they're going to be celebratory with a capital C. And if things go pear-shaped, well, they're going to go pear-shaped with a capital B. And this axis of creativity also suggests the end of a gestation period. And I rather like this one because it's sort of sense that things have come to fruition, or they're about to come to fruition. And when we think about gestation, we think about the 9 months it takes for a baby to develop in the womb and then to be born. That's a rather beautiful way of looking at gestation. But there are lots of ways that things are gestating. We can have friendships, love affairs, projects, creative projects, plans. And so this full moon is sort of saying, look, we've reached this point. Does this have legs? Is this worthy of really coming into reality? And again, going back to that October period and thinking, did you start something then? Is it now ready to be delivered? Or are you at that point where you think, you know what, it's done its time and we're going to throw this out of, the basket of possibilities. It's no longer a goer. Jupiter is your ruling planet, so this gives an extra kind of sense of importance to this. Jupiter being in the 8th house, are we talking about money here? Is this a really important period for a monetary deal? Are you negotiating a mortgage? Are you expecting to have money given to you, whether by inheritance or by a settlement, or your owed money? Is it coming to you? There could be quite a lot of interesting factors with this full moon and Jupiter. And certainly I think it's a booster. And if you have been a little bit backwards in coming forward, so to speak, with things of a financial nature, you've let them go on and you should have attended to them, then this full moon is going to bring you sharply to attention. Things have got to be dealt with before they, get out of control. But on the other hand, things that you've been working towards, it's the time for them to come into fruition. So there could be increase, there could be salary raises, your investments could, they could have more value. But I'm very careful of this, as you know, because when we look at what's been happening out in the world with all oil prices and the various kind of markets being very jittery, I think really the idea of making a killing financially is a bit of a risky business. And if you are in the business of investments, I would advise you to play it quite safe. But let's focus again on this idea of the fullness of time as well, things coming together in the fullness of time. And if you just have that as a saying and just think about it at the time of the full moon and just around it, you'll probably find something that statement really, really fits. And something about where you are is where you've reached in the fullness of time. And there may be even a sense of you coming into your own. I mean, I really like this full moon for you. And I know you can't have every Sagittarian with a kind of a positive experience of this full moon. That's just not plausible. But I think for many, many Sagittarians, this is a peak moment. For others, yes, we do have to put into the arena the idea that what comes to a head may be difficult to manage at this point. But, crisis, opportunity, that's what this is leading to. Out of a crisis comes opportunity. Okay, Sagittarius? Capricorn. Now you'll see that this full moon is flanking the 4th and 10th houses, the sun in your 4th house, the moon in your 10th house. The sun, of course, has been moving through your 4th house since the 20th of March, and it will continue to do so till the 20th of April. And whenever the sun is in this area, it's always about the roots of life. It's about the home itself. It's about property. It's about family members. It's about your own sense of stability and security, what makes you feel as though you're on firm ground. So we look at the sun moving through this area and we think this is a time to put down roots. This is a time to anchor family relationships. This is a time to endeavor to get that stability that you need in life, because if we have a strong home base and things are strong, we've got the family castle around us, so to speak, we can go and fight dragons and demons out in the world. And in a way, this is what this full moon is all about. With the sun at the base, the moon at the top, you get this feeling of either this great sense that with family bonds and with that sense of really having good roots underneath you, there's nothing you cannot conquer. And even if this full moon and the surrounding period does produce some challenges, you're strong enough to deal with them because you've got that strength coming from your roots. However, if that is not the case, and you're currently trying to get a mortgage, or you're currently, worrying about paying the rent, or what you've got going on in the home is a great deal of uncertainty. Who's going to live in the home, who's leaving, all of this makes one very anxious. So this full moon will highlight whichever scenario is more applicable to you. It'll bring things to a head. So yes, there are going to be some Capricorns for whom this full moon is a joyous thing. And of course, with Jupiter in the 7th house, there is a sense that maybe some of that joy comes from a partner, or from love, or relationships, or business partnerships. There could be any number of partnerships that we could think of that's playing into the fact that you feel as though you are full at this time. Your cup is full. Whereas the exact opposite for those of you who are really stressing about money and home and family, then Jupiter will tend to exacerbate it. But you know what? It exacerbates the situation for a reason, because then solutions need to be found. And I think in my experience with Capricorn, I've known a lot of Capricorns And my father was a Capricorn. The Capricorn likes to take time. Saturn rules sign, time, very important. And just occasionally, you can wait too long for something, Capricorn. And I think if you've got an opportunity now coming up around this time, don't spend forever trying to think about whether you should do it or not. Just sort of assume that on alignments like this, whatever has come into your life is something that is for you. It's not against you, it's for you. That really, to take an opportunity is a good thing at this time, and not to delay things or put them off, to really, really go for it. Okay, Capricorn? Aquarius. The full moon for you is on the axis of travel and communication. So maybe you already know what I'm talking about, because you're about to head off on your holidays, or maybe you've got lots of business travel. But again, looking at what's going on in the world with airfares rocketing and uncertainties hovering over, certain countries in the world, it's the best time to travel. But nonetheless, here we are. It's Easter, full moon, you're traveling. So I would advise you, if you're traveling around this full moon, to really be aware of delays, really be aware that you could be diverted somewhere. And, if we go prepared and nothing happens, we think, oh, that's wonderful, and she was wrong. But if you go and you are prepared and I turn out to be right, you will be so happy. And it means just having things available that you would need if something was delayed 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours, whatever it is. What would you need? And, things like that can just be a savior in a situation where it's not your fault. It's just the way things are. And as I said, with travel and a full moon, there are always going to be more complications. And even if you're traveling by road around the Easter period, expect lots of traffic, delays, holdups, diversions, that kind of thing. Communications aren't just about travel, though. They're about reaching understandings, engaging in discussions and dialogues. So you can get things settled on a full moon. And this is particularly useful if you've got a legal case, or whatever you're trying to settle has got official paperwork, things like that. Then this full moon is very good for signing contracts, for doing things that, are law, I was going to say law abiding, but they depend on a legal framework. Let's look at it that way. And I think with Jupiter in the 6th house, which is all about work and well-being, if you are thinking about joining another workplace, or you've got some other ideas related to work, this is a really, really good time for doing that, knocking things on the head and saying, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to sign up for this, and a feeling that your life will expand because of it. But as I pointed out in the first half of this video, Jupiter, it isn't just all good. We don't just have good growth with Jupiter. We can get escalation, as we've seen in this war in Iran, and we can get escalation of difficulties and challenges. So you've got to build that into your thinking, even if it doesn't happen to you. Just the idea that it's possible is really important. Looking again at this map with Pluto in your sign, sextiling Uranus, trining Neptune, got this nice little triangle, and it all is focusing really quite a lot on this 3rd house. It is a time for you, or for people, to hear your voice, to have your opinions aired, and to really make a statement about your beliefs. And of course, Easter is a time of belief for a lot of people. So this full moon period may be exceptionally important to you in regard to your spiritual life. Okay, Aquarius? Pisces. This full moon cuts across the axis of self-worth. And self-worth covers a lot of things. It's how we think about ourselves. Are we worthy of this, that, and the other? Do we feel good about ourselves? Or is it that people are making us, devaluing us and making us feel as though we haven't got what it takes, or whenever we throw our pearls around, we're casting them before swine, useless. And so self-worth is about that area of our lives, but it's also about what we have in terms of money in the bank, values in terms of valuables, assets. Do we have a home? Do we have things of value in the home? And of course, there are values in terms of our values in life, which are different. So there's quite a broad palette to kind of look at in terms of this full moon. The moon, of course, is in the 8th house, so that draws in other people, whether it's other people's resources. It represents institutions, banking institutions, credit card companies, that kind of thing. So is this full moon pointing to some kind of arrangement with a bank or a mortgage company? Is it a period when you might be having really important discussions with your life partner about finances and about, things to do with what you're worth, if you like? And of course, it can be on a whole other level, this idea about what you're worth, because in that whole area of intimacy, when we have, when we feel on an intimate level, really related to, and that is all flowing well in our lives, that does have a knock-on effect of making us feel wonderful. But when our sex lives aren't working and when we feel used and abused by a partner, then our whole, the whole fragile setup in our emotions and our sexual life and our feelings can be very, very delicate. So this full moon can bring up issues all to do with that, Pisces. I think it's a good time to sign something, whatever you're signing, whether it's something with legal obligations, financial obligations, or even romantic obligations. Maybe it's a prenup, or maybe you're getting married or getting engaged. I think this is a nice setup for all of that. But with a certain warning, we've got Saturn and Neptune in that 2nd house of yours as well. Now, it won't be affecting you unless you've got something in early Aries or early Libra, early Capricorn or early Cancer. But if it is, you've got to be careful of scams and people taking advantage of you, people promising you things that they can't deliver. And it's just being aware of it. It isn't necessarily happening right now. But just be aware when somebody is promising you something or somebody is asking for you to do something and it has financial overtone. Just be sure they're genuine. And I think that's the most important thing of that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. One last thing about this whole full moon with Jupiter. To me, there is an area, an aura and an air of jubilation about this particular full moon. And I hope that really does apply in some cases for you, Pisces. Maybe you've got a baby about to be born, a new member of the family, or maybe you can feel you're on the threshold of a new and beautiful love affair. There's something lovely potentially to be born here. And that's another thing I think to focus on. Aries. So you are an Aries and the full moon is in your opposite sign. So we have the relationship axis brought into full kind of glory, one way or the other. And then we've got Jupiter intersecting that full moon. So that is raising the stakes one way or another. Now, not necessarily on the full moon itself, but maybe around the full moon and in the following 2 weeks, there may be an offer. So this offer would be to join somebody, whether it's to join a company, to join some kind of project, or it may be an offer of marriage or something like that. And that's a good thing. Jupiter being in the middle of all of this says, well, all right, all that glisters is not gold. But on the other hand, when you've got a great opportunity presented to you, it would be like looking at a gift horse in the mouth, really. And so to me, it looks as though the offer and the opportunity are good. However, remember what I was saying about positive and negative, that everything in astrology is on that scale. You go from positive to negative. And, it depends on where you are in life and, what's being presented to you at this time. So on the one hand, I'm talking about an offer, a proposal, an invitation that could make a big difference to you. It could expand your life. It may even expand your finances, which is really great and good. But the opposite is the case as well. And that if you have a falling out with someone, if paths come to an end and you can go no further forward with this person or this organization, the cost will be high. Now, I'm not saying you won't come away with some kind of settlement that could be good for you, but I do think that if things are not going well and therefore you're in the separation set of this full moon, then the acrimony and the potential fallout from it is great. So unless you're really sure of where something is headed, if you leave or you break up or whatever it is, make sure that you've got backup, you've got a safety net, that you know what you're doing, because to do something without forethought at this time could be to land you in hot water. The good is fantastic at this time, Aries, but the bad is also possible. So I'm not saying you need to do things in moderation. I'm just saying, don't be sucked into something. Don't do something because you're full of fire and then discover that maybe you've got yourself in hot water. That you don't want to have happen. As it is, I think it's a good time to really make a point of relationships that are going well, whether they're business partnerships, friendships, love affairs, marriages. The feeling that you want to express with your other is that sense of being bonded and of the good things that are about your relationship. You need to restore and replenish that. And of course, at Easter, there are a lot of weddings, and sometimes someone else's wedding can remind us of the importance of a partner in our lives. And maybe if I wanted to just give this full moon a nutshell, it is about the importance of partnership. That's what it's about, the significance of partnership in your life. One other mention we should make, really, and I did refer to this a little in the first part, is that, as you may know, Mars is going to cross over that Saturn-Neptune conjunction in early Aries. So if you are in early Aries, or you've got planets and points in that 1 to 5 degrees of Aries, tread very, very carefully in April, whether we're talking about literally your movements. Make sure that you're focused on what you're doing. But also, it's like, are you stepping into a quagmire? So just bear this in mind. You may not be, but it's all important to bear in mind, and especially over this full moon. It's good to be confident, but to be confident to the point of blind optimism would really be a treacherous thing to be in this particular climate. Taurus, the full moon for you is on the 6/12 axis. And this is an axis to do with so many important things in life. It has to do with how our life runs. That 6th house is the engine of our horoscope, and it's our engine as well, which is why health and work and daily life are all focused on that 6th house of the horoscope. The sun, on the other hand, has been moving through the 12th house since the 20th of March. So this is a period of retreat. Now, of course, that's completely impossible in these days. I mean, which one of us has the luxury of saying, you know what, the sun is in my 12th house. I'm going to take a month to head for the hills, to commune with myself, to meditate, to go to that spa, to renew my soul. Well, it's very unlikely any of us can afford to do that. But what we can afford to do is pay a little bit more attention to quiet times. When we allow the noise of the world to go away, then all sorts of things come to our consciousness, or allow our unconscious to speak to us in dreams and intuitions, and that's healthy. Some things we haven't paid attention to. Our vision is totally straightforward. What's going on in the peripheral part of our sight is being picked up by the unconscious. And what's going on in the periphery could be hugely important. So getting enough rest, making sure you get your Z's in, is really important. And it's very, very important around the time of this full moon that you don't get burnout, you don't do too much, you don't put yourself through too much, because that will really affect mind, body, and spirit. But all you need to do is just ensure you have a decent night's sleep and a little bit of time away from the hurly-burly of life, the idea of the noise of the world, whether it's our phones, all those things that occupy us all the time. They need to be put away, and in the silence and the quiet to come back to yourself. That's the greatest piece of advice I can give you, Taurus, at this time. I mean, by the 20th of April, the sun is going to come into your sign, and therefore you're going to be full on. Everything's going to be happening. So you're replenishing your stores of emotions, your physical stores, all sorts of things. But I think what can also happen at a full moon, when the sun is in the 12th house, the moon in the 6th, is that you can exaggerate minor problems. I mean, yes, if you see a problem, it should be dealt with. But what you don't need to do is exaggerate it. Cut it down to size. Deal with it in a practical way. And the other thing I think is also there are various levels of paranoia, but we can all have our moments of paranoia when we think people are doing this, that, and the other against us, or this is going to go wrong. Someone else has, it's human. It's not, it's normal. But paranoia can really get too much on this particular full moon with the sun in the 12th house. So again, cutting it down to size, rationalizing it, talking about things, talking about your fears, raising, whatever it is that, you're worried about. That's the answer here, not burying it or, losing sleep over it. Back we come to sleep again. Again, when we look at this configuration with Jupiter here, I think the potential for coming up with good solutions out of nowhere is really indicated by this configuration. You don't know what to do about something, and suddenly something happens, or suddenly you have an idea, or you wake up in the morning and think, oh, I know what to do. And to have trust and faith in your ideas, in your belief systems, and your opinions is a really good thing. Okay, Taurus? Gemini. The full moon for you is occurring on the 5th and 11th houses. The sun, all about collaborations, the moon focusing on really creative acts. And, whenever I talk about creativity to people, often the response I get is, oh, no, I'm not a creative type. But you can be creative in so many ways. We can be creative in the kitchen, creative with finances. We can be creative in play. And if you've got children, especially young children or grandchildren, getting down to their level and playing with them is a wonderful way of finding that sort of inner child of ours that really needs addressing. So we could look at this full moon and say this is all about getting in touch with your inner child and allowing your inner child to speak to you. Because if our inner child is grumpy, then a lot of things aren't going well in life. But when our inner child is happy, it's sort of like, oh, everything is feeling kind of good here. So addressing your inner child is one of the jobs to do on and around this full moon. But of course, it's more than that. It's the idea that something is completed, that a process that has been going for a while is ready. It's done and dusted. It's ready to be delivered. Again, we come back to the idea of child and children. Is it a baby to be delivered? Possibly. But we have projects, we have plans, we have things that have been taking a while to come together. Even a relationship, a love affair takes time to progress from those early days of dating to more serious considerations, whether it's about moving in together or even getting married. So we've got these things coming out of this full moon, the idea that something can be settled between you and another person, or something that you've been working on is ready to be shown to the world. It's done. And Jupiter being involved in this full moon suggests that this could be a really big thing. And I think, Gemini, sometimes you have a lot on your plate. You like to have a lot of diversions and diversity in life generally. And you don't always afford a great deal of time to one particular project. But I think in this case, if you can think about a project that you have been deeply involved with, that has taken a lot of time, effort, your heart, and your focus, then from this and that idea come great things. Now, this doesn't mean that something that's new, that's just happened, is going to necessarily deliver the goods, or something that you've been playing around with is going to be that thing. It's more about something you put a lot of heart and soul and effort into. That being ready at this time and paying off is what I'm talking about. Jupiter, of course, has been in the area of self-worth since last July, well, June, actually. So hopefully you have seen your income grow, or you've done some clever things with your income. Maybe you've even started a business or done something extra, and you're getting something from this, whether in terms of finance or just getting quite a lot out of it. And that too may be in this full moon mix, that you realize that the efforts you put in to a venture where there's been money or money coming from it now look as though they're successful, that this is something that you have achieved. So it's a fairly good picture at this time, Gemini. But I want to say that Uranus is getting near that 29th degree. It will have got there by the middle of April. And then on the 28th of April, Uranus is going to come into your sign. So especially if you're an early Gemini, or you've got planets and points between 0 and about 3 degrees of Gemini, Sag, Pisces, and Virgo, then there's going to be change. So another way to look at this particular configuration, this full moon squaring Jupiter, is that now is the time to get your ducks in a row. Absolutely spend every moment getting things together in preparation for things to really take off or to happen or to change as we get into May. Okay, Gemini? Cancer. This full moon is one of the more important full moons of the year, because it is flanking the life direction axis. We've got the sun in the 10th house. That's everything to do with where you're headed in life, your big kind of ambitions, work, if you work, career. But it can also be your standing in the world. So how you think you stand in society and where your position is. It's that kind of thing, 10th house. 4th house is really to do with home, family, the roots of life, and the foundations of the future. So you see why this is a really, really important full moon. Things come together at full moon, or they splinter apart. And of course, this is all going to happen over the Easter period. So it could be a time of celebration, families coming together, people coming together, and that feeling of happy endings and a beautiful sense of unity that can be experienced. And I'm, of course, looking at the full moon squaring Jupiter in Cancer in your 1st house, that sense of your cup runneth over kind of thing. But we can look at the opposite and see that there could be a crisis here. And if things aren't going well, or there are family tensions, or there are problems, and they're, going to have to be met around this period, they're going to be really big. They're not, easily kind of put away in the sense of, oh, well, we can cope with that at another time. We don't need to bother with it now. It's like you have to deal with it, even if it's at the wrong time. Something bubbling up at this full moon time needs to be dealt with before it gets bigger and more unmanageable. So I've got to throw that in as well, although I'd much rather focus on the good things, the idea of celebration and joy and family get-togethers and sense of unity. But it isn't going to be that way for all Cancerians. Coming back to Jupiter in Cancer, you've got Jupiter moving through your sign until the very end of June. So there's another 2 whole months, well, 3 months actually, to go. And Jupiter is encouraging you to push the boat out. This can apply to you career-wise. It can apply to you in terms of your heart, being prepared to say, this is what I want, this is who I want, this is what will make me happy. And of course, nobody wants to be selfish, and Cancer is not a selfish sign. You do think about other people. But, if you constantly think about other people and doing things for everybody else, and it's not making you happy, then, where are you? Life is short. And I think Jupiter is encouraging you to go for it, whatever it is, whatever that statement applies to, however it applies to you, then this is something you should tell yourself, and particularly around this all-important point when you can see this very powerful full moon squaring Jupiter. Last but not least, let's look at that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. They're also in that 10th house point, and it's intersecting Uranus and Pluto. Very, very powerful. I know a lot of Cancerians have got a lot of things on their plate at the moment. They're juggling a lot of things, whether it's business and finance, or whether it's things to do with their family and their home. But, if this all comes to fruition, it's going to be worth all the hassle and all the effort. Okay, Cancer? Leo, the full moon for you, I was going to say the full moon is in Aries, but that's not true. The sun is in Aries, the moon is in the opposite sign. But Aries is your fellow fire sign, and the sun has been moving through Aries since the 20th of March. So it's often a good period of the year. And another reason for this is that the sun is moving through your 9th house. And this area is all about far horizons. And even if you're a home bunny, and that means more to you than anything else, you've got friends maybe, or business interests, or, occasionally you'll travel, you'll go to a holiday resort, or maybe in terms of your business or your job, you have to travel. And there is a lot of accent on travel and distant places in this period of the year anyway. But the full moon itself is flanking that axis of travel and communications. It's hooked up to Jupiter. So again, I'm back to that theme. The good is fantastic and the bad is off the charts. There's no halfway thing here. So what I want to say, if you are traveling on the full moon, around the full moon, that means the day before, the day of, the day after, even the day after that, remember that things are often a little bit more stressful with travel. There's more traffic on the roads. You've got more people at airports. You've got more people at seaports. So the potential for queues and delays and missing the boat are much more likely at this time. So don't leave anything to the last minute, Leo. You already may know, if you're heading to the airport, that there's going to be delays at the airport. Well, you know what? Add another hour onto that, and then you'll get there. Whereas if you leave things and say, oh, it'll be all right, it's always been all right before, you may find it's not all right. And with this in mind as well, take things that you would need if you were delayed or diverted somewhere. Things you can't get where you're supposed to go. So what will you need? You'll need to make sure you can get in touch with people. You've got telephone numbers, you've got stuff for the kids, you've you've got your computer with you, whatever it is, make sure that you are built for unexpected circumstances. And that way you will be crowing about how smart you were. Oh, and probably how smart I was too. So yes, travel with more than you think in your hand, rather than leaving everything in bags or to someone else. Get that done around that time. But of course, there's more things to this. There's this whole idea of this being a very spiritual kind of full moon. And if you are very religious, or you see this time as a time of, major spiritual, happenings, then it's going to be very rich. You're going to have very powerful spiritual experiences. And I think the same thing if you are attending a course or you're doing something where the content of that is uplifting or it's inspiring in some way, then this looks very, very good indeed. I think, too, the idea of the waning moon, this full moon still covers that. So even though you get past the full moon and past Easter and you think, oh, well, that's all right, none of that came true, but it's still alive and well as we go through, more into about the 27th, 28th of April. That is the waning cycle. Last but not least, that little configuration, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, that little mini triangle up there. You know something about that? That really is what I call the alignment of fate. There's a lot of things that we would consider are fateful at this time. And depending whether or not you have that Saturn-Neptune conjunction anywhere, that means anywhere between 0 and 4 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Libra, Cancer, or Capricorn, you will be tempted to think that you were in the right place at the right time, or the reverse, or that what's happening is incredibly meaningful. And that, of course, is playing into the powerful full moon squaring Jupiter. Virgo, this full moon falls on the axis of finance and self-worth. And it's a lot more than that. It's not just about money. It's about relationships, the way you are treated by other people, the way people show how much they value you, how much they need you, how much they are prepared to share of themselves with you. So this full moon could be very important to a very close relationship. The understanding of just how close and how intimate your relationship is, and the trust that goes between the two of you. This full moon is highlighting that potential. But never forget, as I've explained earlier in my video, that Jupiter is growth, and this full moon is connected to Jupiter, and you can have good growth and the escalation of something you don't want to grow at all. So that if you are feeling estranged from someone, if you are feeling disconnected and unaddressed, then this is likely to be exacerbated at this time. And of course, at Easter, we're often doing things with our partners, and we may be at events which, make us think about what we don't have in our relationship. And so that's why it could be a very emotional full moon for you in terms of what's not happening in a close relationship. Now, put that on one side and let's look at finances. Because here, all full moons are good for signing contracts and setting a deal, setting the seal on a deal. So if that is in the pipeline, you're going to purchase a property, for instance, or you're going to make a big purchase or a big investment in something, this is a really, really good time to do that. And I would say with Jupiter in play here, you will do very well from your investment. Of course, there's a but, the whole thing with is Jupiter going to escalate things in a way you're not happy with. You've always got to bear that in mind. But if you're putting an investment, whether it's an investment of time, money, energy, your heart into something, to a certain extent, you have to be very confident about it, because, if you're not confident, you shouldn't be doing it. But if you're confident about what you're investing in, you should feel very confident indeed. Let me put it that way. I think with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and its part in the Pluto-Uranus-Neptune kind of dyad, you know, that we've got this little triad here that you can see in black. This does have its focus on money, and it does have its focus on relationships. So for many Virgos, this is really a time of self-assessment. It's just how much am I worth to other people? And depending what comes back, whether you feel, I know that I'm valued, which is good, but if what comes back is the sense that I'm not valued at all, then this really is a crossroads for you. Are you going to go on throwing your pearls before swine? Or are you going to say, I'm worth more than this, in which case I'm going to be empowered by this full moon, and I'm going to say enough is enough. I don't necessarily have to do it on the 2nd or 1st of April, but within this waning cycle, I'm going to really consider my way forward without these people or that person who does not appreciate me. The whole issue of self-worth is at the heart of this full moon for you. So Virgo was my last sun sign, and this is my conclusion, you know, my kind of fireside moment with you all. And, you know, when I was putting this full moon video together, and I'm thinking about what's going on in the world, because it might be possible to ignore it and say, oh, I'm just not going there. It doesn't bother me. You know, I'm done with that. You know, I'm just getting on with my life. I mean, you could say that, and you have a right to say that if that's the way you feel. We must always be our authentic selves. What we truly feel is what we truly feel. But I think there is another argument here that I think needs examining, is this idea that, you know, especially with this notion that the times we are going through, whether you look at this level effect, whether there's the reality of what's going on in the world with all its hardships, and when we look up a little bit and we see that there's a spiritual purpose here, there's some kind of divine energy at work, this is all trying to manifest, it's all happening at the same time in different kind of layers. You know, there is a line of thinking that if you choose to detach yourself from the harsh realities and all the furore of what's going on, you detach yourself and you enter that space where there is peace and calm, I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think it feeds our sense of balance and harmony with ourselves and our beliefs and all of that. But you can't stay there. That's the important thing. You know, that is, you can't permanently stay out of it, because we need to be engaged. And I think I've said this before, we are here at this time very purposefully. We're all part of this huge transition, and we can see it happening in front of our eyes. We can see world powers changing. We can see what's going on with our own eyes and ears. We know that's happening. And there's a reason we're here, because we have to be a conscious part of this, whether we are just witnesses to it or whether we're participants. And I have sort of talked about this before, this idea that some of us are actively involved, whether we're, you know, soldiers or whether we're, or whatever we may be, we're part of everything that's going on, politicians, leaders, we have businesses, you know, whatever it is, it would be a very active part of this transition that's going on. And others of us really are more witnesses, if you like, but we must be active witnesses. And I think our thoughts do form a reality, and they certainly are part of our collective unconscious, if you like. So I think it is good to have our thoughts in a way that are trained on strength and courage and all of those things. But it's this idea of escape that I don't like, and this idea that you can move to a new level and stay there and not be part of what's going on. I think we have to be present. We have to engage. We have to know what's going on. And we have to think what part we can play in this that could be to the good and to the benefit of what we're going through with humanity, rather than saying, I'm just stepping outside here because it'll all happen without me. And I'm not engaging. That's why we're here. That's why we've chosen to be here at this time, or why we have been placed here at this particular time. Food for thought, everybody. Okay. So if you like this video, please press like. And if you want to subscribe, I'd love you to subscribe. It grows the channel. And I know we all say that, but it's true. And we like growth. Bye for now.